At Thanksgiving, my sister found out I had $12 million, and my family turned on me, demanding that I hand it over because in their eyes she deserved it more. My name is Emily, I'm 38, and this is something I've been carrying around for too long. You know those families where one child gets put on a pedestal while the other might as well be invisible? That's my life in a nutshell. Up until I was 8 years old, things were fairly ordinary. I was the only child, and while my parents weren't the type to smother me with affection, they were around. My mom helped me with homework, and my dad would sometimes take me fishing at Lake St. Clair. We weren't picture perfect, but we were okay. Then came the night that flipped my world upside down. I still remember my Aunt Linda knocking on my door at 2 in the morning, telling me to grab a suitcase because my mom was in the hospital. My sister Jessica was arriving early, 2 whole months before she was supposed to. The next few weeks blurred together in a mix of hospital trips and hushed conversations I wasn't meant to hear. Jessica was tiny. She didn't even look real, more like one of my baby dolls, except she was hooked up to wires and tubes. I wasn't allowed to touch her, wasn't allowed to get too close. That's when I first felt it, that wall. The invisible barrier that slowly separated me from the rest of my family. When Jessica finally came home, our house was never the same again. It turned into what felt like a sterilized laboratory. My mom developed this obsession with germs. We had industrial-strength disinfectants, bottles of sanitizer in every room, and the smell of bleach hung in the air constantly. Even now, the scent makes my stomach twist. And here's the part that really sank into me as a kid. Every time I showed even the faintest sign of being sick, a sniffle, a cough, even just a sneeze, I was shipped off. Sometimes to Grandma Helen's, sometimes to Aunt Linda's. First I thought it was fun. Grandma baked cookies, and Aunt Linda had shelves of Nancy Drew books I loved getting lost in. But kids aren't dumb. After a while I understood. I wasn't being sent on little adventures. I was being pushed away. I was a risk, something dangerous to the fragile new star of the family. My sister. I tried so hard to earn my parents' attention in better ways. Straight A's? Mom barely looked up from Jessica's doctor schedules. Won first prize at the science fair with a project on renewable energy? Dad only asked if I could store the display board in the garage because, apparently, Jessica might be allergic to cardboard dust. Is that even a real thing? And then came the moment that really broke me. I was 12. I had been practicing for months for the school talent show, teaching myself how to play bridge over troubled water on the piano. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would finally be something they'd notice. The night of my big talent show finally came. I had practiced for months, but Jessica had a 99.1 degree fever. Barely even a fever, really. And guess what? No one from my family showed up to watch me play. Not a single person in the audience for me. 2 weeks later, though, every single one of them, including both sets of grandparents, was front and center at Jessica's 15-minute flute recital. She squeaked her way through hot cross buns and butchered it, but they clapped like she was the second coming of Mozart. Jessica figured out the game fast. By the time she was 7, she didn't really have any serious health problems anymore. But that didn't stop her from acting like she did. A headache? She got to skip school. Feeling tired? I was the one who had to pick up the slack. Nervous about a test? Mom would actually call the school and get the date moved. Meanwhile, I retreated more and more into my room. Books became my escape. Art, history, antiques, anything that transported me to a different world. Funny thing, my room doubled as a safe haven because Jessica claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener. That meant it was the one space she wouldn't invade. And here's the sad part. When she faked being sick, a piece of me almost felt relieved. Because at least that meant I'd be sent to Grandma Helen's house. At least someone there would ask how my day was going or care about what I had to say. Grandma was the one who opened my eyes to vintage jewelry. She had an entire collection of costume pieces, rings, brooches, necklaces, that she let me organize and catalog. Looking back, that was probably the first sign of where my life was headed. The hardest part wasn't even the favoritism. It was how my parents rewrote history to justify it. They'd say things like, Jessica just needs more attention after such a rough start. Or Emily's so independent, she understands her sister's special needs. No, I didn't understand. I was just a kid who couldn't figure out why having a healthy immune system meant I deserved less love. And those messages, they don't just vanish. Being told you're a burden or a threat sticks with you. But it did teach me something, self-sufficiency. When nobody checks your homework or notices your accomplishments, you learn to clap for yourself. High school for me wasn't the best years of your life like people claim. It was a launch pad, a ticket out. While Jessica was building her little drama club empire in middle school, I was strategizing my escape route. Nothing lights a fire under you quite like knowing no one else will do it for you. Those hours I'd spent cataloging Grandma Helen's jewelry, they weren't wasted. They taught me organization, structure, detail. In high school, I carried that into everything: color-coded notes, perfectly outlined study plans, a desk that looked like it belonged in a home organization magazine. Jessica mocked me for it, called me Rain Man. Nice, right? But here's the thing about being invisible. No one's paying close attention. No one tracks your failures or your wins. That means you're free to chase whatever you want. So I did. I joined every club that fit around my shifts at Carson's Diner. And you know who remembered my birthday that year? Not my parents. Not Jessica. It was Donna, the owner of the diner. She baked me a little cupcake and sang happy birthday while I wiped down tables. Debate team? Check. National Honor Society president? Check. Editor-in-chief of the school paper? Check. I was stacking up achievements like trophies on a shelf no one ever looked at. It was debate, though, where I really found myself. There's something deeply satisfying about dismantling someone's argument piece by piece, while keeping your voice steady and calm. That stage, that spotlight, it gave me power. And without realizing it, I was learning how to negotiate, how to fight with words instead of fists. Skills that would end up saving me later in life. I won state championships twice. Both times I begged my parents to come. But Jessica had soccer games, C-team soccer mind you, where she didn't even step onto the field. Guess which events they chose? Yeah, not mine. Junior year, things really got interesting. I took the SAT. Not just did pretty well, but absolutely nailed it. A perfect score. 1600. Less than 1% of test takers ever see that number, and I was one of them. I stared at the computer screen for 20 minutes straight, convinced there was some kind of glitch. Then I bolted home, ready to share the biggest accomplishment of my life. I walked into the Kit Alvarez where Mom was leaning over Jessica's English homework. Mom, look. I got a perfect SAT score. I blurted, practically glowing. She barely looked up. That's nice, honey, but keep your voice down. Jessica's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow. And Jessica? She smirked. Yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. Mom smiled at her, not me. Jessica, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner. That moment stung more than I can even explain. My perfect score never made it to the fridge. But Jessica's C+ in English? That got a prime spot, complete with the "we're so proud of you" magnet. When it came time for college applications, I knew better than to expect help. I applied to 15 schools completely on my own. Wrote every essay, hunted down every recommendation, filled out every piece of financial aid paperwork. My guidance counselor, Mr. Alvarez, became my lifeline. He stayed after school with me to walk me through FAFSA because my parents were too busy. Honestly, he was the only adult in my life at that time who seemed invested in my future. Then the acceptances started rolling in. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, University of Michigan. Each one came with scholarships attached. I tucked every acceptance letter and scholarship offer into a locked box under my bed, because I knew what would happen if Jessica got wind of it. The moment Emily leaves for Harvard, they'd say, poor Jessica will be all alone. They'd find some way to twist my success into her tragedy. The day I got a full ride to the University of Michigan, Jessica made junior varsity cheerleading. Guess which event triggered a family celebration? They all went out to Olive Garden while I sat upstairs eating microwave mac and cheese. But you know what? I didn't even care. That scholarship was my golden ticket. Tuition covered, housing covered, meals covered, even a book allowance. It was my escape hatch, my way out of that house where I was always either invisible or inconvenient. The day the big envelope arrived, I carried it straight to my favorite place in the library. 4th floor, corner window seat that looked out over the park. I sat there for an hour and just let the tears fall. Not sad tears. Relief. For the first time in my life, I could see a way out. That evening at dinner, I told my parents I'd been accepted to the University of Michigan. My dad frowned. Michigan? That's so far away. What if Jessica needs you? My mom chimed in. I hope you're not expecting help with expenses. Jessica's cheerleading is already costing us enough. And Jessica? She squealed. Finally, can I have your room? I need more space for my TikTok videos. So that summer I worked every double shift I could grab at Carson's Diner. Donna, the owner, treated me better than my own family ever had. She slipped me extra tips, made sure I got to take leftover pie home, and taught me a lesson I carry to this day. Baby, she'd say, the loudest people usually have the least to say. Learn to tell the difference between noise and truth. Move-in day came, and of course my parents couldn't make it. Jessica had another cheer competition. Aunt Linda was the one who drove me, carried boxes up the stairs, helped me set up my dorm. Before she left, she handed me an envelope with $500 tucked inside. Your grandma Helen wanted you to have this, she said softly. She's proud of you. Later, I found out Grandma had scraped that together from her Social Security checks, saving bit by bit. That night in my dorm, I sat on the narrow bed, stared at those plain cinderblock walls, and made myself a promise. I was going to build a life so solid, so bright, that being overlooked would never be possible again. Not to get revenge. Not to prove anything to my parents. But for that lonely 8-year-old version of me who used to get sent away for sneezing. College flew by, late-night study marathons, way too much instant ramen, the intoxicating rush of independence. 4 years later, I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan. My family barely noticed. They were too busy helping Jessica switch schools for the 3rd time in 2 years. But life had a twist waiting for me. My first job was with Everett and Phillips Auction House in Detroit. Not their real name, but if you know the world of antiques and fine art, you probably know who I mean. High-end clients, old money estates, the kind of place where family histories get appraised along with silverware. I started at the bottom, cataloging estate sales, endless sets of china, antique furniture, bric-a-brac from people who'd lived very comfortable lives. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent and gave me a foot in the door. Then came the Kingston estate. Mrs. Kingston had been an elderly widow with no heirs, and she left behind an enormous stash of what everyone assumed was costume jewelry. Whole rooms filled with it. That was when all those hours with Grandma Helen's collection finally paid off. I was sifting through trays when I stopped at one brooch. Art Deco, understated, not flashy at all, but something about it felt wrong. The weight wasn't right for fake. The clasp was too intricate for a knockoff. My heart sped up. I remember skipping lunch that day, hunched over my desk with a pile of reference books and a laptop open to 3 different tabs. Maker's marks, signatures, weight comparisons. I chased every lead I could find. By the time the office emptied out, I was still there, using the company's database like my life depended on it. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This costume brooch wasn't costume at all. The problem? I was the rookie. Nobody was going to take my word for it if I just blurted out, hey, this could be Cartier. So, I did what debate team had drilled into me years earlier. I built a case. Every lunch break, every evening, I buried myself in research. I even drained my meager savings to pay for an online gemology course, just so I'd have the vocabulary and credentials to back myself up. 2 weeks later, armed with a binder full of notes, comparison photos, and historical references, I walked into my boss's office. Mr. Whitman, I began, voice shaking, I think the Kingston collection might include something significant. Without even glancing up from his phone, he muttered, Emily, we've already marked those pieces as costume. I know, sir, I said, sliding a photo across his desk. But these hallmarks line up perfectly with Cartier's 1925 series. That got his attention. He put the phone down, finally looked at me. And where did you learn all of this? I stammered. I did some research. That so-called costume brooch ended up selling for $47,000 at auction. $47,000. Turned out it was part of a limited series designed for a European aristocrat in the 1920s. That sale changed everything. Whitman began handing me more pieces to evaluate, testing me on items others had overlooked. What had once been my odd little hobby, sorting Grandma Helen's old jewelry, scribbling notes in a notebook, suddenly became my edge. I threw myself into it. Every spare dollar went into courses, books, or tools. Weekends I'd haunt estate sales, studying pieces, teaching myself authentication tricks. My apartment walls were plastered with printouts of vintage hallmarks, my coffee table stacked with gemology guides. To anyone else, it probably looked like a conspiracy theorist's lair. To me, it was freedom. And it started paying off. The auction house's reputation grew because of my finds. My name began circulating among collectors. Commissions fattened my paychecks. For the first time, I wasn't just scraping by, I was building savings. Family dinners, of course, were the same circus as always. Mom would say, Emily's still at that little antique shop, right? I'd correct her. It's an auction house, Mom. And yes, I just authenticated a Tiffany original. Jessica would immediately cut in, squealing about some charm bracelet she'd picked up at the mall. Everyone oohed and awed over her trinket, and I sat there quietly, realizing it didn't sting anymore. Because finally I had something of my own. Something I was great at. Something no one could rewrite or dismiss. 2 years in, my big break arrived with the Rothschild estate. It was a massive, high-profile collection, the kind of job people in the industry whisper about for months. Our team was cataloging their jewelry when I spotted it. A modest Art Nouveau piece that everyone else brushed off. But something nagged at me. I stayed late, triple-checking every angle, every engraving. 3 sleepless nights later I confirmed it. This was no ordinary piece. It belonged to a French jeweler's private collection, thought to have vanished during World War II. When it hit auction, it sold for $238,000. The next day, Whitman called me into his office. My hands were shaking. I thought this was it, the promotion I'd been waiting for. Instead, he leaned back, folded his hands, and said something that floored me. "Emily, you're wasting your talent here." When Whitman told me I should start my own business, I laughed it off. Me? A business owner? With what money? With what safety net? But his words stayed in my head, whispering louder every day. So I dipped a toe in. I picked up small freelance authentication gigs, the kind of work antique dealers usually sent off to the big firms. My prices were lower, but my reports were meticulous, and word spread faster than I ever expected. One night, sitting in my tiny apartment surrounded by stacks of jewelry, books, and second-hand magnifiers, I had this lightning bolt realization. Why not me? Why couldn't I build something of my own? So I did the reckless thing. I drained my savings, took out a loan against my car, signed a lease for a storage room above a Chinese restaurant. The rent was cheap because the whole place smelled like Kung Pao chicken and the Wi-Fi only worked if you stood by the window. But it was mine. Those early months were brutal. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning with my heart pounding, calculating how many weeks I had before the money dried up. My office furniture was a card table from Goodwill, and a chair I rescued from the curb. Yes, I cleaned it. It wasn't glamorous, but what I lacked in furniture, I made up for in reputation. Thanks to my time at the auction house, I had contacts who trusted me. I started small, antique dealers, estate liquidators, offering thorough reports for a fraction of the price. Slowly, people noticed the quality of my work. 6 months in, I got my break. A dealer asked me to review a large Victorian brooch collection before it went to market. I spent 2 straight weeks poring over every clasp, every engraving, running on caffeine and stubbornness. Hidden in the pile were 2 pieces misidentified as cheap replicas. They weren't. They were rare originals. When the owner sold them, she was so impressed with my documentation that she gave me 10% of the sale. My cut? $86,000. More than I had made in 2 years combined. After that, the floodgates opened. Collectors started calling. Estate lawyers wanted my input. Even the old auction house quietly sent me projects. Something told me Whitman was slipping my name to the right people. By my 2nd year, I wasn't alone anymore. I hired Claire, a fresh gemology graduate with sharp eyes and a quiet voice nobody seemed to hear. She reminded me of myself, and I swore she wouldn't be overlooked the way I was. Today, she runs my entire authentication department, worth her weight in gold. We moved into a proper downtown office. Goodbye Kung Pao smell, hello skyline view. I built a team of specialists. We became known for uncovering treasures that others dismissed as junk. You'd be shocked at how many multimillion-dollar pieces sit in dusty attics labeled costume jewelry. And through it all, my family had no idea. They thought I was still clocking hours in a second-hand antique shop. Jessica would smirk over Sunday dinner. "Emily, I've got some old bracelets I was going to drop off at Goodwill. Maybe your little shop could use them?" She'd joke while I nodded politely, knowing full well that that very morning I'd authenticated a $1.2 million fabric piece. Mom still introduced me to neighbors as my other daughter Emily. She works with old jewelry or something. Meanwhile, I'd just been quoted in Forbes under my company's name, celebrating the opening of our 3rd office. And you know what? Keeping it from them became almost fun. Like carrying around a delicious secret. I'd sit there at the family table in my clearance rack Target sweater, really Chanel, smiling quietly while Jessica bragged about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I had closed a deal that week worth more than her yearly salary. For the first time in my life, being invisible wasn't a curse. It was my superpower. Sometimes I play these little games just to amuse myself. Like slipping on a Harry Winston necklace to Thanksgiving dinner, Or wearing a vintage Patek Philippe watch while Jessica gushed for 20 minutes about her luxury Michael Kors piece she scored on sale. Not once did anyone notice. That's when I realized the truth. People only see what they expect to see. Meanwhile, my real challenge wasn't authenticity anymore. It was growth. By year 5, my company had expanded into Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I was practically living on airplanes. Our name carried serious weight in the high-end jewelry world, especially with clients who valued discretion. Wealthy families didn't want splashy headlines. They wanted someone they could trust behind closed doors. That's where we shined. And the money, let's just say it required a whole team of financial advisors. Yet I kept my lifestyle low-key. A comfortable home in a good neighborhood, a tasteful car, nothing flashy. The only indulgence I allowed myself was my fortress of a home office. State-of-the-art authentication equipment, biometric security, and a custom vault that could make Fort Knox sweat. My parents assumed my sacrifices were funding them. "Emily's such a sweetheart," my mom would say, living off ramen just to help us out. Meanwhile, I just closed a commission worth more than their entire annual mortgage. The irony never failed to sting. Because here's the strange thing about success. The more you achieve, the harder it becomes to explain to people who've only ever seen you as less than. It's like trying to describe color to someone who's lived their whole life in black and white. They literally can't picture it. So every Sunday I'd show up for dinner. By day, I was negotiating with collectors in Dubai and authenticating $1,000,000 Cartier pieces. By night, I was Emily the antique shop girl, sitting in worn jeans while Jessica stole the spotlight with stories about carrying coffee to her boss without spilling it. Then came a night I'll never forget. I just authenticated a missing Cartier treasure worth 7 figures. I drove straight from the meeting to my parents' house, still buzzing from the adrenaline. Mom looked me over with concern. "Emily, honey, are you eating okay? That sweater looks so worn." I bit my tongue. It was a $3,000 cashmere piece I'd picked because it looked unremarkable. Jessica pounced. "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of messing around with old jewelry," Dad added his usual line. "Be nice, not everyone can be as successful as you." I nearly choked on overcooked pot roast trying not to laugh. That was also around the time I started quietly wiring $5,000 a month into my parents' account. Aunt Linda had confided that they were drowning in Jessica's loans and medical bills, maybe even thinking of selling the house. Despite everything, I couldn't let them lose it. When Mom asked, I downplayed it. "Just $1,000, I'm really tightening my belt." They assumed the rest came from relatives. Jessica, naturally, took credit, bragging that her hard work had inspired the family to pitch in. Watching her waltz in with new Gucci bags and lavish vacation photos, while I was literally funding her lifestyle, was almost comical. Almost. Then came the MBA drama. Jessica announced she needed to go back for her MBA. At another pricey private school, of course. Mom called me crying, saying they couldn't afford it. I gently suggested she try a state school. "Oh honey," Mom said, "you don't understand. Your sister has to maintain her standards." Then came the ask. Could I increase my monthly help? I bumped it up to $7,000. Barely made a dent in my accounts. But when they praised Jessica at dinner for taking initiative with her education, assuming I was eating ramen to make it possible, yeah, that one stung. The kicker? That very same business school had invited me to give a guest lecture on luxury goods authentication and scaling a global brand. The dean himself reached out. Meanwhile, my family thought I was still scraping by polishing old lockets. I skipped Sunday dinner that week. My excuse? Work ran late. The truth? I was standing in front of MBA students, teaching them how to build a business from scratch. By then, my 2 lives had become almost unbearable to juggle. By day, I was running a multi-million-dollar authentication business. By night, well, every Sunday night, I was just Emily, the other daughter, the antique shop girl who never quite measured up. Thanksgiving was the breaking point. It started innocently enough. Mom called a couple of weeks before, crying about her herniated disc and how the thought of cooking for 20 people terrified her. I offered to handle dinner, not just help handle it. Truth? I was tired of pretending her bone-dry turkey was edible. "Don't worry, I'll have it catered," I said. Her voice cracked. "Honey, we can't afford that." "Don't worry about the cost," I told her. She panicked. "You're not taking out a loan, are you?" I bit my tongue and booked one of the finest catering companies I use for corporate events. The kind of food that makes you wonder why you ever bothered with home cooking. Cost more than they thought I made in 2 months, but I didn't care. Thanksgiving morning arrived and everything was on point. Maple glazed Brussels sprouts, rosemary turkey, truffle mashed potatoes. Jessica sniffed and sneered. Store-bought stuffing? Mom's is way better. This from the girl who once burned toast badly enough to set off the fire alarm. She went quiet fast enough after her first bite. Later, I slipped into my old bedroom, untouched since high school, unlike Jessica's, which had gone through 3 remodels, to check on an online Hong Kong auction. I had a client waiting on authentication. My laptop was open, programs running, tabs everywhere. That's when Jessica barged in without knocking, same as always. She spotted my laptop, smirked and whispered, "Let's show everyone what Emily's really doing." Before I could stop her, she strutted back into the dining room, holding my laptop like a prize. Picture it. 20 relatives, half buzzed on expensive wine they thought came from Trader Joe's. Jessica spun the laptop around with a triumphant grin, expecting to humiliate me with a screen full of silly antique trinkets. Instead, silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The screen showed. Account balance $12. 4 million. Pending authentication contract. $485,000. Recent transaction. $1. 2 million. Hong Kong auction. Company quarterly profit report. $4. 2 million. Jessica's face shifted through shock, denial, and finally pure panic. She swayed like she might faint. This can't be real," she whispered. Mom asked, "Jessica, what is it?" Jessica's voice cracked. "She's rich. Emily's rich." If it was possible, the room grew even quieter. You could hear Mom's fancy wall clock ticking. Then Mom giggled nervously. "Don't be ridiculous. Emily works at that little antique shop." I stood up slowly, smoothed my sweater, the one worth more than their monthly mortgage, and finally said it. "No, Mom. I don't. I own one of the largest jewelry authentication firms in the country. Offices in 3 cities. The pieces I handle are worth millions." Utter chaos. Dad coughed so hard he nearly choked. Aunt Linda dropped her fork. Uncle Frank started sputtering into his wine. And Mom's laugh twisted into something darker. She shot to her feet, face purple. "You've had millions. And you let us struggle? I send you $7,000 every month," I reminded her. She shouted back. "While sitting on millions? Your sister has student loans." That was it. No congratulations. No we're proud of you. Just outrage that I hadn't handed over everything. Jessica started sobbing. "You betrayed us. You betrayed me." Then Dad piled on. "How could you be so selfish? We raised you." Something inside me snapped. Years of being invisible. Years of being dismissed. Years of being told I wasn't enough. It all boiled over. "Raised me?" I shot back. "You shipped me off to Grandma's every time I sneezed. You skipped every award, every concert, every milestone because Jessica might feel left out. You never saved a dime for my college, but somehow there was money for her private school. And now you're angry that I built something without you?" The next 5 minutes were chaos. Mom shrieking about family duty. Dad shouting about ungrateful children. Jessica swinging between sobbing and demanding to know how much money I really had. Meanwhile, the caterers tried to serve pumpkin pie while pretending not to exist. I grabbed my laptop, slung my Hermes bag over my shoulder, the one Mom once called a cute replica, and walked out. Behind me, Mom was already brainstorming how to spend my money. Something about Jessica's MBA and a new car. On the drive home in my limited edition BMW, my phone exploded. The family group chat lit up like fireworks. Jessica plastered Facebook with tear-soaked posts about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. By the time I walked into my house, there were 47 missed calls and over 200 messages. Mom's texts told the story all by themselves. 7:42 p.m. "How dare you walk out on family?" 8:15 p.m. "We need to talk about this like adults." 9:03 p.m. "Your sister deserves a share of your success." 10:30 p.m. "I've already called about houses in a better neighborhood." 11:45 p.m. "Why aren't you answering? This is your mother." Jessica doubled down, painting me online as some greedy dragon hoarding gold while the beloved family suffered. The comments section turned into a circus. Old classmates I hadn't spoken to in decades suddenly had moral opinions. And then came the flying monkeys. Aunt Barbara phoned to remind me that family is everything. Uncle George emailed me an essay about the duty of sharing wealth. A third cousin's wife's sister, don't even ask how she got my number, left me a voicemail full of Bible verses. But nothing topped Monday morning. I walked into my office to find Mom, Dad, and Jessica camped out in the reception area. They told my receptionist, Claire, that they had an appointment for authentication services. Jessica clutched her Michael Kors bag like it was crown jewels. Mom announced, "We've discussed it as a family." I cut her off. "A family discussion without the person you're discussing. Got it." Ignoring me, she continued, "We think it's only fair you set up trust funds for everyone." Jessica chimed in. "I need at least $2 million to start my life properly," Dad added. "And your mother and I want to retire, somewhere nice like Florida." I stared at them. "Did you forget I've been sending you $7,000 every month?" Jessica scoffed. "That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us." "Owe you?" I said, my voice cold. "For what? The years you ignored me? The graduations you skipped? The times you made me feel like a ghost in my own house?" Mom snapped. "Don't be dramatic. We gave you everything." "No," I said, pulling out my phone. "I gave myself everything. And right now I'm done." In front of them, I canceled the monthly transfers. Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. Jessica's crocodile tears dried up instantly. When they refused to leave, I had security escort them out. Watching my 60-year-old mother yelling about ungrateful children while being dragged past the lobby plants was surreal. Claire asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, but I did put their names on the building's do not admit list. The harassment didn't stop. New phone numbers, fake emails, even messages sent through my company's customer service portal. Finally, I had a lawyer draft a cease and desist letter. That's when Mom tried to weaponize Grandma Helen. Except Grandma wasn't having it. Her exact words? "Good for Emily. About time someone in this family succeeded on her own terms." It's been 6 months since Thanksgiving. I've moved into a new home with tight security. Changed all my numbers. My business is thriving more than ever. Ironically, some new high-profile clients reached out because they respected the way I handled my family situation. Jessica is still posting bitter Instagram captions about toxic wealth and betrayal. I hear she's trying to start her own jewelry authentication business. Good luck with that. She once called Tiffany, that girl from Breakfast at Tiffany's. Mom and Dad finally backed off after my lawyer outlined exactly how harassment charges could wreck their lives. Now they tell relatives they never wanted my money anyway, and that they're praying for my soul. And me? For the first time in my life, I'm free. No more Sunday dinners full of sly insults. No more playing small so Jessica could shine. No more financing the Jessica show. My therapist calls it healthy boundaries. I call it finally living honestly. One last note, since I know she's reading, Jessica, about that Cartier bracelet you showed off on Instagram? It's fake.